Oh! Whoa! Wow! Hot fish. Awesome. Well, welcome everybody to Volume 2 of Sport Fishing on the Flies, Fly Fishing Still Waters. You know, this video is all on fishing shrimp and fishing with leeches. And in the springtime and in the fall, two best patterns you can use, because that is the food source available for the fish, are shrimp and leeches. Of course, they can feed on shrimp and leeches all year round. So if you get a good insight today from Brian and Dawn, because they're going to bring you today's video, and you know they got great insight as to how to fish for these fish. And you know, for me, I like fishing them in the fall, because in the fall time, there's not a lot of people out on the waters because a lot of guys are out hunting, and the fish are in prime shape like this one here. And look at this beautiful fish. Whoa. Well, I think this big bad guy, big bad guy there is ready for this. Wow. Whoa. How's that, eh? Isn't that a beautiful fish? Get that in the sun reflecting off it. Just chrome and healthy and big, and oh, that's really what you want. Well, there goes. Well, you know what? That's it for me. I got to catch my fish. But now I get to run the camera, which I'm actually looking forward to, because I know I'm going to learn a lot about fishing shrimp and leeches, because Don and Brian have got so much knowledge to impart on us. So I think they're about ready to roll. So why don't you enjoy this video, Fly Fishing Still Waters, Shrimp and Leeches.
Thanks for the introductions, Grant. How come he always gets to fish before us?
There's something wrong with this picture, Don.
But as Grant explained, the video is all about shrimp and leeches, and it should be a very informative video. We're here in the fall, and we are going to talk about the shrimp and leeches. Why is this such a good time to fish the shrimp and leech?
Well, in the fall, we've passed all the major insect hatches. Water temperatures have cooled down, and the fish are looking for bread and butter food sources like shrimp and leeches. Excellent.
Well, the first thing we're going to key on is the shrimp, so we'll head up to our shelter and maybe talk a little bit about the life cycle, and then we'll proceed to the leeches a little later on. So why don't we head up to the shelter, talk about shrimp?
Sounds like a good idea.
All right. Well, Brian, let's explain to everybody what a shrimp is.
Well, shrimp, Don, are members of the crustacean family, so they're close cousins to the saltwater shrimp and crabs, lobsters, things like that, except they live in fresh water, and they unfortunately don't nearly get or attain the size that you see in saltwater.
What stage of the shrimp life cycle is available to fish?
Well, basically, when the shrimp hatch out usually in the late spring months, they're pretty small and hard for the fish to seek out. But those small shrimp go through numerous molts, and by the fall of that year, they're readily available. So I guess they could eat them as small juveniles, but mostly they're eating them as sub-adults or as adult stages.
And how long does it take for the shrimp to achieve the adult stage?
It usually takes about 4 to 6 months for them to get big enough before they'll be able to mate for the first time.
Why are shrimp an important food source for fish?
Well, Don, you know, there's been studies done on lakes and spring creeks in the States where researchers have counted over 10,000 gamma shrimp in 1 square meter of bottom of a lake or a stream. So the bottom line is they're abundant, and there are a lot of calories that trout get out of them, so it's a good food source, and there's simply so many of them.
And they're available throughout the winter?
They're available actually throughout the whole year, and so when there's no insects hatching, then certainly there's always shrimp. There's always some shrimp to be found.
When Grant and I are out fishing, we notice there's lots of different sizes of shrimp. What are the different types of shrimp you expect to find in our still waters?
Well, in British Columbia, we're pretty well confined to 2 common species. The larger one called gammas, which get to about ½ an inch in length, and then their smaller cousin called the hyalella shrimp, which get to about 1/8 of an inch in length.
Is there any way of telling them apart?
Well, if you had a high-powered microscope and you looked at a small gamma shrimp and a small hyalella shrimp. The hyalella shrimp have a little spine at the back of each segment on the back of their shell. Otherwise, it's really hard to tell. You have to basically go by size. The real big guys are the gammas, the real small guys are the hyalella.
More importantly, can the fish differentiate between the two?
Well, they certainly can tell whether they're eating a big shrimp or a little shrimp, but what's more important is that these shrimp almost segregate by habitat. The hyalella shrimp, the smaller shrimp, like to live amongst the marl in those clear marl lakes along the bottom of the shoals, and the fish will root them out of there. Whereas gamma shrimp like to hide amongst the vegetation that you see on the shoals and the edges of the drop-offs.
Why are the shrimp colored differently in various lakes?
Well, they're different colors mainly for three reasons. It's the water quality, the type of quality of the water, the chemistry of the lake or stream that they're living in. Their diet has an impact on what color they are, and also water temperature has an effect on what color or shade of green, for instance, that the shrimp are.
Okay, now what type of lakes do we expect to see them in? Acidic, alkaline?
Well, normally with shrimp, because they have a chitinous exoskeleton, the shrimp that you peel, like on a saltwater shrimp, they need a lot of calcium in the water. So we're looking at lakes that are neutral to alkaline in pH.
Okay.
So you don't find good shrimp populations in really acidic lakes. And for instance, lakes that have abundant lily pads or all lily pads as the only vegetation in it and are quite tea-stained in color, you won't see very many shrimp in that lake.
pH-wise, we're looking at probably 7 to 8 or higher.
Yeah, 7 right up to the high 8s, and probably the best habitat would be pHs of 8 to about 8.8.
Well, I think to end off the talk on shrimp, we better review the whole life cycle of the shrimp.
Yeah, sure, Don. Shrimp usually mate 1 or 2 times a year. So you'll see coupled shrimp or what appears to be mating shrimp throughout the summer months, but usually the most intense mating does occur in the late spring and early summer. So the eggs are fertilized on the underside of the thorax of the female shrimp, and they'll appear as an orangey red brood pouch under the thorax. It's just like a saltwater shrimp in the ocean. And when those eggs hatch, they hatch and just fall away from the female and begin life in the lake.
And they're fairly small at this point.
They're almost microscopic. They're very small.
Okay, and then they get bigger as they progress and molt.
And shrimp will molt 7 to 9 times a year, meaning they'll outgrow their chitinous exoskeleton that we talked about earlier and will form a new one. And when shrimp are molting, anglers will often wonder why they see a light blue or baby blue colored shrimp in the water, and that's usually a shrimp that's freshly molted.
Excellent. Well, that's a great talk on shrimp. I hope everybody takes that information and can use it. I think we better get on the water and actually show some fishing techniques to catch fish on shrimp.
Sounds like a good idea.
Well, we should probably explain why we picked this spot over others.
Yeah, we followed the edge of the drop-off. You can see the weed line. We came up on the weed line, and the weed line, the shoals like this and then dropping off, and we're going to cast right along the edge of the weed line.
And the closer the better. Like, we've actually seen fish moving in a foot of water.
That's right. So we know they're on the weeds in very shallow water and on the edge of where the weeds drop off into the slightly deeper water.
Now, obviously, it's an advantage to have the wind to our back and fish out to the fish, because you don't want to ever be casting into the wind. It doesn't make sense.
No.
So what we've done is actually pushed right up into the really shallow water, and now we're going to use our indicators and our intermediate sink lines to go and bring it over the weeds.
That's right. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, what are you starting with?
I'm going to start with the indicator.
The indicator. And the shrimp?
And the shrimp.
I'll start with the intermediate sink.
All right.
His first cast. And look at all that. All the weed and everything on there. Wow, well that's what you get sometimes when you're fishing the shrimp with the indicator. Look at that. Oh, jeez. What a mess.
Oh, I got a mess here. Well, we're in shallow water.
There's no doubt about it. Well, what we've done is just came out, and the best way we find, whoa, he's still going. Best way to find to go after the shrimp right off the bat are in the shallow waters, in the weeds. I mean, that's where the shrimp hang out. And that was probably the best way to start off.
Well, we're anchored right along the weed line here, right on the edge. And we're just pitching them in on the indicator right on the edge and just hanging them there.
And that's probably the best way to fish the shrimp,
Well,
you think?
This time of year when those fish are moving, swimming in and out of the weeds,
Yeah.
it's hanging there and we're giving it the odd little bit of movement.
I think it's definitely my favorite way to start off with the shrimp. I mean, you can move them with the dry line or the intermediate sinks, but I find with that indicator, again, it's a visual way to fish. So let's get this guy on the net without all the weeds. Well, that's a nice fish. Oh, a nice healthy fish. There you go.
Beautiful fish.
Beautiful fish. And again, maybe we should talk a little bit about the setup that you're using while we release the fish. Okay. That's a beauty. There he is, the shrimp. Little corner of the mouth.
Corner of the mouth.
No, that's a pretty fish. Hold him up for everybody. Oh.
These guys are such well-conditioned fish. They're
Oh, they are.
grab a hold of.
Look at that. Oh, just a dandy. Let's review the setup then. Let's go
So
over
we've got the, I've got a little bead-headed shrimp here, just trying to get the last of the vegetation off it. So we got a little bead-headed shrimp,
Okay.
and I'm running 4X or 6-pound tippet down to the fly, and I've got my indicator suspended about 4.5 feet above it,
Okay.
and just pegged it off there.
Because again, we are in fairly shallow water. I mean, you almost have to suit the depth from your indicator down to your fly according to the water.
Absolutely.
So
yeah.
we're fishing, 3 to 4 feet of water. That's why Brian's down 3 to 3.5 feet, which is perfect.
We're trying to present the fly closer to the bottom than the surface, and the indicator helps us achieve that by keeping it suspended at a very precise depth.
I've also noticed that you have a loop connector onto the fly, the loop knot.
Yeah, I'm
you
using
tie on
the
there?
loop knot just so that when I'm fishing with the indicator, if you get a chop on the water, even when you're retrieving it, the loop knot lets the fly swing
Which
much
is
more
perfect.
naturally.
We do that naturally
Yep.
with chronom. It's just a great knot to use all the time.
You bet.
You know what? There's a lot more fish in there too.
Let's get another one.
My turn.
Okay.
Well, I think we should show everybody how we're actually doing the shrimp with the dry line and indicator, how we're retrieving the fly.
Sure. Well, first of all, when we're using the indicator here, we've got quite a chop on the water. So actually, when you get a chop on the water and the indicator's bobbing up and down, it adds a lot more action to the fly. And when we use that loop knot to tie the fly on, it really does swivel back and forth. And so oftentimes you'll get fish just by letting the wave action move the indicator up and down. Otherwise, we're going to be doing a very occasional slow hand twist retrieves, just moving it along, pausing it, and then picking up the retrieve again. And so we're moving the shrimp very slowly through a very narrow depth zone. Hopefully,
And we're working a horizontal zone.
working it horizontally and presenting it hopefully to a few fish.
So now this is also just sitting over top of the weed bed also.
We're just above the tops of the weeds.
And just bring them nice and slowly across.
That's right.
Where
So
the
it's,
shrimp cruise.
the shrimp are naturally in amongst that vegetation, and
And a lot of times I notice too when we're out there and we're actually retrieving, if you're not hooking weed, you're not in the zone.
that's
what I
right.
found.
And we can see by the fish we've been catching today, our hooks and our leaders are covered with.
Right in the weed. And plus every time I bring it in, check your hook, because when you do bring it in, if you're not hooking weed, then you're not in the fish, and we always got to take that weed off almost every cast.
That's right. Every cast.
Oh, there we go. I got one, Granny. Oh, on the shrimp. Shrimp on the end. Oh. Wow. Oh man, the wind is just howling. Look at the net. And that was on, right? Oh, Freschi on the shrimp, on the intermediate sink, right across the top of the weeds. Unreal. You know what? I don't think it matters if you have a shrimp or a leech on right now. Bring it across there. They're looking for both.
They're hungry.
They're hungry, right? Oh, gee. Well, I think we should talk a little bit after this fish about the retrieve we're using for the intermediate sink. How we're actually retrieving the fly.
Yeah.
Oh, this guy just ripped it. And you know, the neat thing is with the clear intermediate sink, since that fly is down maybe just a little bit deeper in that weed, more into the weed bed, they're really popping.
They grab it.
Grab
It's a fleeing shrimp.
The fleeing shrimp, yeah.
I'd be fleeing too if I was being chased by one of these things.
Something this size. He unbuttoned. Oh, but that's all right. You know what we'll do now is get the line out again and we'll talk a little bit about the retrieve. So let's get her casted out here. Long line release. Now with the intermediate sink, since you do want it to sink down a little bit, this intermediate sink has a very slow sink rate. Probably 1.5 to 2 inches per second. Yeah, fairly slow rate. So we're just going to cast it out. What I like to do is now do a count, get into a normal count. Usually I start with about 10 to 15 seconds, and I find if I'm not hooking weed, I go longer. Gotta get down
there.
And then just start the slow retrieve back. Again, the shrimp, some move fairly quickly, don't they?
Yeah, some do, but normally hopefully they're not being molested, so they're just swimming in and out of the tops of those weeds.
So you just want to kind of bring it up and through the weeds. So what I do is I find just nice little short pulls, inconsistent pulls, really sporadic, because the shrimp, you know, they dance all over the place and really sporadically. And really, essentially, you just hang on. And keep the rod tip low. That's something that is very important, to keep that rod tip near the water. A lot of guys hold the rod tip up and they give it this kind of action.
No.
It doesn't work really well.
You want that straight line connection, fly rod, fly line, leader, and then you're going to hook them. You're going to feel the strike and you're going to hook them.
Just like that. Fighting fish.
Nice.
Oh, they're just
How about water temperature? When you took a temperature earlier on, it's about 50 degrees Fahrenheit, 10 degrees centigrade. It's perfect.
It is. Hey, what are the ideals?
In the fall, when it gets below 10 and below, 10 degrees or 50 degrees Fahrenheit, down to about 44 degrees Fahrenheit.
That's prime, is it?
That's prime.
Oh, look at that. Look how fat this guy is. Wow.
Beautiful
fish. Let's unhook him here. So you're saying prime temperature is 44 to 50?
Yeah, 44 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit. That's once it gets below about 40 degrees Fahrenheit, you know, into the 30s, that water's starting to cool down. You got to remember these fish are cold-blooded, and they start to slow down.
Start slowing down a bit. There's that shrimp right in that corner. Get that out. Ho-ho. There's another. Oh, a little shower for you.
These fish are so fat, they have no
I know,
wrist.
they got no wrist. You can't grab them. Jeez, it makes it tough. I got to try to get them this way. Holy cow, like I can't get them by the knuckle at all.
He's a rookie.
Holy cow. Oh, there we go. Oh, man. Look at how fat that guy is.
Beauty.
That is just a dandy rainbow. Holy cow,
fish.
prime fish. What a porker. This guy's going to die of a heart attack. He's just so fat. And there he goes. Shrimp and leeches. You know what? You can't say enough about it with shrimp and leeches.
Especially in fall time, springtime.
Well, here's a good cost question for you. You're a hunter. Now, what would you rather do? Go and kill something or come fishing? Well, I mean,
I think I'd rather be here.
Yeah, than fishing. But I mean, you do hunt, and I mean, the moose is excellent and deer and everything else. And you can't beat a moose sausage. But a lot of people miss out on some of the best fishing of the year.
No, it's a tough time of year for people that like to do a lot of hunting and fishing. But well, you can see what's out here, what's available late in the fall.
And so easy. Like it is. It's not what we call simple fishing, but it is a lot easier. Like beginners could probably do this.
Yeah, well, the fish are hungry and they're on the bite, and they know winter's coming, so they really do grub up.
Go in that shallow water and cast some flies and catch some fish. let me get the net for you, Bri. Yeah, what happened? The wind, it was nice and clear this morning. Now the wind's just blowing. Oh, that's a nice fat male. There you go. Look at how fat he is. He's just a big fatty. Okay, I'll hold the net for you.
Shrimp out of there.
Yeah, as we mentioned throughout the video, shrimp and leeches in the fall and spring, two best times to fish them. And into shallow water. No, yeah, look at that. Caught on the net there a bit. There you go. Oh, yeah, that is dandy.
Shrimp.
Shrimp.
It worked.
Unreal. But you know what, this time of year, in the fall and in the spring, we should just clarify that the fish have to come in here and feed, because really there's no insect hatches happening anymore.
No, we're well past the big insect hatches. So in the fall period, they're looking for those, and it's bread and
Yeah,
butter.
so head into that shallow water and have fun.
That's right.
So let's go to the bench, tie up some shrimp.
Sounds good. I'm going to tie the simple dubbed shrimp pattern right now. So make sure you have the following materials before you sit down and tie the fly. The hook is a Mustad Signature C49S in size 12. Thread is 8/0 olive. The tail is olive Arizona synthetic peacock. The rib is fine gold wire. The body is olive Arizona synthetic peacock. And the shell back is light olive scudback. It's got the hook and the vise. I'm just laying a base of tying thread from the eye of the hook back to the bend. And I've chosen this curved caddis shrimp hook, even though when shrimp are swimming they're straight, a lot of times they still have a slight bend in their back, and that's why we use this pattern. So I'm going to take some of the synthetic peacock and just pinch off a bit to form a bit of a tail. So, and I'll trim that later. And then we're going to lay down the olive scudback for the shell back, tie that in at the bend of the hook. So, and then we're going to tie in our fine gold wire, which will be the ribbing. Okay, and then we're going to lay in our body material. And I'm just going to use a bit of wax on the thread, and then I'm going to take the dubbing and lay it on the hook, on the thread. And it's fairly thin. Because when we make the body after we're finished, we'll use a little dubbing brush to pick it out. And we just bring it forward. I've left it a bit of a hump in the back and tied it off, like so. I'm going to take our scud back, pull it forward fairly tightly, tie it off. And we're going to take our fine gold wire and create the segmentation that you see in the natural carapace of the shrimp. Tie that off. And then we're going to take our whip finisher to finish the fly. So, then Then we have to take a bodkin or a dubbing needle, and then we want to work it amongst that dubbing and pick it out. So, and then we can also use a fine dubbing brush to pick some, finish it off just to make sure, get lots out. And we don't want the dubbing fibers to be much longer than about where the hook point is. So we trim those off. And then I'm just going to trim the tail, like so. And then we have the finished simple dub shrimp.
Well, it's my turn, and I'm going to tie you up the parasitic shrimp. Now, some people get confused and think that a pregnant shrimp is actually a parasitic shrimp. Well, there's a difference. When a shrimp gets a parasite in it, it's a very small orange dot on the very mid section of the back. And we're going to try to duplicate that in this fly. Make sure you have the materials ready before you tie the fly. For the hook, we're going to use a Mustad Signature C49S size 10 hook. We use some 8/0 olive thread to tie with, a pearlescent glass bead as the bead, some deer hair for the tail and the shell back. For the body, we'll use some olive crystal chenille, some burnt orange dubbing as the parasite, and some fine gold wire for the ribbing. I'm going to start the fly off by tying in my thread. And I've taken a very small amount of deer hair, stacked it, and I'm going to tie in the tail. And I want to keep this tail fairly short. And we'll just wrap our thread around that, keep the tail short. And try to tie in a little bit behind the tail, just so it sticks out a bit. And now bring all this deer hair back over, because we'll be using this to put our shell back, to create our shell back later. Take some fine gold wire, and we're going to put it onto the hook, and we'll have this held back, and this is actually going to form our ribbing of the shell back a little later. Now we'll take some green crystal chenille and tie it at the rear of the hook, and this is going to form our body. And I only want to wrap it up halfway up the hook, so what I'm going to do is form some very thin wraps onto the hook and go up halfway up the hook. Now I'm going to take some of my orange dubbing and dub on a little bit onto the thread just to form the parasite look. And I actually want to wrap it back over my green crystal chenille so that I can wrap forward without going over my orange sac. Take the thread forward to the bead and finish wrapping up the body. And you should see a nice little orange sac right in the middle of the fly. Now that we have the body tied in, I'm going to take all my deer hair that I have on the top, pull it forward to form the shell back, and now with my other hand, I'm going to take that fine gold wire and form the segments on the shrimp as I bring it up, going over the shell back. And actually this will tie in the shell back at the same time, right until we get to the bead of the hook, and then tie off. Now just finish by cutting off your excess wire, put a couple of wraps on, do a whip finish, and if you would like to, you can actually put some head cement on just to hold it in. And there's the finished parasitic shrimp, or parasitic scud as we call it. We're back at the shelter, and I think we better explain what a leech is.
Leeches are members of the phylum Annelida, which are segmented worms, and that includes roundworms like aquatic earthworms, terrestrial earthworms, and also includes leeches.
Are there different types of leeches found in our still waters?
There's about 50 different species of leeches found in the fresh waters of North America. And a common misconception of many people is that A lot of people think that all leeches are bloodsuckers, but actually, in fact, the majority of the species are scavengers or predators, and they like to eat meat rather than suck blood.
A lot of people have the misconception that leeches are in every lake. Are they in every lake?
Well, they potentially could be in every lake, Don, but it's more common to see leeches in lakes that there's abundance of food for the leeches to feed on. And so the lakes that we like to fish, the rich, productive eutrophic lakes, that's where the majority of the different species are found.
Why is the leech such an important food source for fish?
Simply because they're a big food item. I mean, a big leech, fully extended, swimming in a lake could be 6, 7, 8 inches long, and so it's a big food item. They're found in most of our productive small lakes that we like to fish, and there's a lot of calories associated with eating them.
I think we should talk about the different colors. I mean, we've noticed black, red, brown. Are they all different colors?
Yeah, certainly we see a lot of different shades of leeches, different colors, like you've said. Most species in North America are mottled in coloration, meaning a combination of colors, black and green, black and maroon, maroon and brown, things like that. And I think that's because it helps them in their camouflage. They can hide. They're very secretive in a lake. You don't often see leeches free swimming. They'd be very vulnerable if they're swimming around in the wide open because they can't outswim a fish. And so their coloration not only helps them maintain their camouflage in the water, but it's also important for anglers to understand that leeches are more nocturnal in their habits, so they're more active under low light conditions and in the evenings. And I think that's why we get some pretty good leech fishing at night.
And then one other thing we should touch on is the water chemistry. Again, is it very important to be acidic, alkaline? What do they like the best?
Well, because leeches are scavengers and predators, they love to eat shrimp, damselfly nymphs, mayfly nymphs, things like that. They'll eat a rotting carcass of a dead fish if it's in the water. So you're going to see that associated with relatively productive water. So it's that neutral to alkaline water, although you'll see them in acidic lakes as well, but I think they're more common in neutral to alkaline waters, the more productive waters.
To finish off our talk on leeches, let's review the life cycle of the leech.
Well, Don, they have a fairly simple life cycle, but a rather interesting one in that each individual leech has both male and female reproductive organs within that individual, but they do mate in pairs. The females then secrete little cocoons of eggs that they hide on the underside of rocks and logs, and those eggs will eventually hatch 2 to 3 weeks later into an almost microscopic leech, which continues to grow and hides amongst the vegetation where it tries to avoid predation.
Now, how long do leeches live for?
Actually, leeches can live a very long time. It wouldn't be uncommon for a leech to live 4 and 5 years.
Excellent. Well, now that we've finished the conversation on the leeches, the water's calling. I can hear those big fish again.
I think it's time to go out.
Let's get at it. That's
Nice fish, Don.
Great way to get into the
Beautiful
fishing.
fish.
What we've done is we're showing you the different leech techniques right now. And this intermediate sink line is very, very effective in shallow water. You know, we're probably in what, 4 feet of
We're
water?
anchored in 4 feet of water, casting out to 4 or 5.
And what happens here is the big fish all move into that shallow water. You know, it's the time of year. Again, they come in looking for those leeches and shrimp. And this big guy came up. I put on a baby leech. Now this is what we call really small leeches, just micro leeches, small ones, not the big guys. And this guy, he plugged it. Oh, look at that. Is that a dandy or what? That's a beautiful fish. Now the big thing here too is with the intermediate sink line, the clear intermediate sinks, I allow it to sink probably 20 seconds, so we're still just right near the top. And bring it slowly back, and look at that.
That's a gorgeous fish.
I'll let you hold them up.
Oh,
That's not a bad size
it's a
fish.
beautiful fish, Don.
Wow, look at that. And that's the nice thing about fishing shrimp and leeches, is you get these big fish cruising in near the end of the year, and they are big. It's just beautiful.
So the fly's out, and I'll just get it out of there.
Wow. I'll grab the net from you. Look at that.
There's a beautiful fish.
Isn't that a dandy?
Beautiful.
Oh,
So just do a
unreal.
quick throw
Sure.
pump.
I'll hold the
See if we
net
can.
for you. And again, that was caught on the baby leech, and I think that's a real good candidate for the bench when we go later
I think so.
for the leeches, because it is. I mean, that was first cast with the baby leech, and it is a very effective pattern in the spring and the fall.
Okay, we got that.
We'll get that throat sample.
And
I'll release the net. Oh, look at that. Hold that up again. Isn't that a beautiful fish?
Beautiful fish.
The big fish come out for
In
those
the
leeches
fall.
and shrimp in the fall.
In the fall.
Yeah. And the nice thing too about the fall is you get the prime fish. They're not, you know, you don't get the colored guys. They're all silver
They're just
again. Beautiful.
Well-conditioned fish.
So what do we have in the throat sample?
so we'll have a quick look here.
Oh, looks like we got a few shrimp there, Don.
Yeah, got the shrimp in there. Isn't that nice? Couple of damsels even.
And there's a couple baby damsels, but the interesting thing is they're all alive. Everything in there's alive.
So he's just been feeding, just coming in right now.
I think we could have a good day.
All fresh stuff. Well, let's get on with it then and keep trying these leeches for a little bit. Well, as Brian is playing his fish, I'm going to talk to you about the setup we're actually using here. Now, this is the clear intermediate sink that I have on, and Brian has a intermediate
Is
sink.
it another intermediate sink?
It's just
on,
not the clear. And what we're doing, oh, that's a nice fish. And what we're doing is actually casting out and just allowing it to sink for about 15, 20 seconds and then slowly bring it back. Now, the important thing you got to know with this clear intermediate sink is it only goes down probably about 2 feet.
Yeah, and with the continuous retrieve we're doing, we're just bringing it over the tops of the weeds on the bottom here.
And the fish are actually cruising in the weeds and on top looking for leeches and shrimp. And it's a very, very effective way to fish. And as you can see, that was the first cast, boom. And
That didn't take long.
holy cow, that's a beauty. Well, I'm going to put my rod down here and net this guy for you.
In there, Don.
Ah, I see we have the big Rushton nets. These are beautiful
Dragon
nets.
Special.
Oh, man, these
It's
are
the
lovely.
big fish net.
Yeah, well, you need it here. Oh, look at that. Oh, that is a dandy. I'll hold the net. You can do the fish. Now, I think we should talk a little bit after you release the fish about the setup.
Sure.
What we actually have on here, but let's let this guy go first. Oh, another beautiful fish. You know, I can't stress the importance of the time of year. I know a lot of guys go out hunting in the fall, and really, you're missing out on some of the best fishing you're ever going to experience because all the big fish in the lake come in to feed.
The condition
Oh,
on
look
that.
at that. Is that a beautiful fish? Nice male.
Beautiful male.
Wow.
Fall
that's lovely.
colors.
Oh, lovely. Lovely. Well, what we'll do is actually go through the setup that you have on here right now, Brian.
Sure. Well, we've got the intermediate lines on, and we're fishing about 12-foot leaders down to 4X, 6 pound, and that's pretty good strength for this time of year, and it should cut through any of the weeds that are down there.
Right, and they're not going to be leader shy. That's another key thing. When the fish are coming in the shallow, they're just looking for food.
Yeah, they're on the move. They know winter's coming,
Yeah.
and they want to get as much body fat on before we get this hard surface on
Yeah,
this lake.
it's what you call being focused. The fish are focused on
They're
eating.
focused. Gee, Don, they're moving even tighter close to the shore there.
Jeez, that was like a foot of water, wasn't
It's
it?
pretty shallow there. We could probably get away with some indicator fishing in there.
Well, you know what we should do is probably head in there then and show people how to indicate
I
fish.
think we should.
Let's do it.
Oh, those fish have been moving in that real skiddy water, so I
Yeah.
put the indicator out.
Yeah, but when you're talking about skinny, what is skinny?
Well, they're 2 to 3 feet in depth.
2, 3
that's it.
feet, like a foot. These fish
Yeah.
are just in
Really
so shallow
shallow.
water, so really
They're
ideal.
They're really feeding today.
Yeah, and a great technique though is the indicator. So what we have here for the setup is our dry line coming down to an indicator, and again, it's only a foot off the indicator. It's very, very shallow. Geez, I'm still rigging up. You just got your fly out there. Unbelievable. Man, oh man. They are just feeding. So one thing we should do is talk about the different techniques. I mean, we've shown the intermediate clear sinking in the shallow water.
Right.
What other techniques are there?
Well, we've got the intermediate, we've got a floating line with or without an indicator in shallow water.
Right.
And then leeches are always a good time, or a good pattern to use, I'll give you the net.
Yeah.
To try when you're searching on a new lake.
Okay.
Because
So
it's
trolling around
or
essentially.
mooching a fly around. And then in the summer doldrums, when the insect hatches are down, leeches and dragonflies, but leeches in particular are good to fish along the parallel to the drop-offs or
Okay.
pulling them up over the edges of the drop-off. It's just a searching pattern. They're always there. You know, they
So
live.
just going down deep, putting on a full sinking line and getting her down nice and deep.
Putting on a type 3, even a type 4.
Which at
type
this time of
6.
year, we don't have to do.
We don't have to do. This is the advantage of fishing in the fall. It's shallow water, big fish.
Unreal. Well, we'll let this guy go here. That's a nice fish. And you know what? We've seen some beautiful fish coming out so far. There's just some dandies in here. Oh, nice fish, Bry.
Beautiful fish.
One of the average size, you know, not huge, but just a nice average size. Very nice.
Oh, still in
He's
there.
still on there. There he goes.
They're just well-conditioned fall
Oh,
fish.
look at that.
Just
Isn't that a
beauties.
beauty? Oh,
Beauties.
nice fish. You know, one thing we should talk about too is throat sampling. Now, throat sampling is good for cron emitting. It's also good for shrimp, but not for leeches because they are such a big food item.
Yeah,
right?
unless you're eating small, immature leeches, it's hard to get a leech up to the
the orifice of the pump,
It's just
right?
too narrow. But sometimes you do. But that's why we know, like in the fall, we know they're going to be eating shrimp and leeches.
So
what we're gonna
really, I mean, the throat sample, sure, it's nice to take, but not a really effective tool at that time of year.
At that time of year, it's not.
Yeah.
It cannot simply because it is a big food item.
Yeah, and after this video, everybody's going to know shrimp and leeches in the fall.
You bet.
I guess we should talk about the setup here and how we're using it, Bri, how we're retrieving.
Well, we pegged our indicators that we're in about 4 feet, 4.5 feet of water here, and I'm down about 3 feet. Probably around the same.
About the same, about 3 feet. And really the neat thing here is it's all visual. Again, you've got your indicator on, and all I'm doing to give mine some motion, I got a nice blood leech on right now. Just long, slow pulls, and I'm letting it sit. And the fish are so actively feeding along these beds that they're just swimming by and just hammering it.
Yeah, some of them have actually hit it just sitting there, not even moving it.
Right?
Or like you said, a couple quick pulls, and then as it drops down again,
It gives it that wiggle motion, it's heading down and they hit it.
of the up and down. Yeah.
And you just wait and see, because they do. They pull it right at your hand. And one thing I noticed too is the set right away. A lot of them are taking it soft. Some are charging it and taking the indicator down hard, and others are just sucking it in. Yeah, and you've got to really strike on everything. Just to give it that little motion once in a while. When you can hear the fish in there boiling around. And what a beautiful day for it. You know, this is a perfect fall day for fishing. We got a little bit overcast. The light isn't, you know, the light levels are low. And like you said, like Brian said in the intro, they are nocturnal. I mean, the shrimp and the leeches, both
Like
nocturnal. Low light, and this is ideal conditions. I mean, you got the low light, no sun, little overcast, perfect conditions for leech and shrimp. After we get this guy in, what do you say we go to the bench and and finish them up, finish up the leeches. So what are you going to tie for a leech pattern?
Peacock plastic chenille
Okay.
with a black marabou tail.
Is that what this guy is, or is that a
That's
different
what
one?
this guy's on.
Okay. And I got my little baby leech that I mentioned earlier that we're going to go with. So, or as Mo says, the micro leech. Oh, that's a nice fish. Oh, yeah. Oh. Oh, yeah, there he is. Oh, yeah. Look at how fat they are. Oh yeah.
What a beautiful, that's a beautiful fall rainbow.
Beautiful fall rainbow. And that's what you're going to expect with leeches and shrimp, the biggest fish in the lake.
They're so pretty this time of year.
You know, that is a real nice thing to mention too, is they're finished to spawn like in the spring. That might be a real ripe fish, where now they're just fresh again.
The belly.
Oh,
It's a heavy fish.
oh yeah, it's beautiful.
Gorgeous.
All right, well, let's let him go. And there he goes. And now we're going to the bench and
Sounds
tie up a
good.
couple of leeches.
I think we're going to need them.
Well, we've come off the water and it's time to tie up a few patterns. And I'm going to start us off by tying you the micro leech. Make sure you have these materials ready before you tie the pattern. For the hook, we're going to use a Mustad Signature C53S size 10. We'll use some 6/0 black thread. For the dubbing, we'll use some Arizona Semi-Seal in black and red. For the segments, we'll use black marabou and some green crystal flash as the flash. I started the fly off by tying on my black thread, and I'm going to take some of my dubbing and dub a small patch on the very rear of the hook and tie it in. Now take a few strands of your black marabou, and I like to pick off the very end of the feather. Not from the top of the feather, but the very bottom of the feather. I'm going to pull off a few strands and tie this in for the back wing on the fly. And just measure it up about the length of the hook and then tie it in. Take some more dubbing and dub on a little bit more of the nice red and black dub. Form a second segment on the fly and wrap it forward. And now we'll take some more black marabou and again keep it fairly thin, and we're going to tie in a second segment of the fly, and again the length of the hook, and move it back. Now we're going to take some more dubbing and progress our way up and form another segment on the fly. And this is actually forming some segmenting for the leech because they are segmented, and it kind of breaks it up into different segments. So I'll put some more dub on and then wrap it forward. And again, I always go back over the marabou I've just tied in to help flatten it down a little bit. And we'll continue this pattern up until we have 3 or 4 marabou segments on the fly. Take one strand of crystal flash and cut it in half. And what I'm going to do is place this on the thread and bring it up so I have 2 strands of crystal flash on either side of the hook. And make sure they go down the side of the hook. You don't want it on top. You want to make sure these strands go on the side. And then trim them to about the length of one of the segments. So this is going to be about 1/2 inch long. We're now going to dub on our last segment. And this is actually going to be the head of the fly. So we want this to be nice and full at the top. Dub on a fair amount of our dubbing. And finish the fly off by forming a nice head. Now we're going to whip finish and tie it off.
going to tie the Las Vegas leech now, so make sure you have the following materials ready to tie. The hook is a Mustad R74 size 8, thread 6/0 black. The bead is a 1/8 gold tungsten bead. The tail is black marabou with pearl flashabou highlights, and the body is peacock plastic chenille. First thing I've done is I've pinched the barb of the hook down, and then I've slid on my 1/8 inch gold tungsten bead up to the eye of the hook, and then I'm just building a body, a base of tying thread, bring it back to the bend of the hook, and I take my black marabou, and I'm going to tie in a tail, so. And the tail should be about just longer than the length of the shaft of the hook. And I'm just going to add a little bit more to that. You want to add a fair bit of marabou to the tail because when it gets wet it thins down, and you also want it to be pulsing or breathing in the water. Then I'm going to take my flashabou and I'm going to tie in a couple strands on each side of the marabou just to accent it and give it a little bit more flash when it's being retrieved through the waters. So there's a couple strands going on this side, and then I just double it over and I'm going on the other side now, like so. And just trimming them. And then I'm going to take my peacock plastic chenille, which is very flashy and shiny, and then tying it down as I lay it down the shank of the hook, right to the tail. Bring my tying thread back, and then I'm just going to bring my peacock chenille forward, winding it fairly tight together so you get a nice even body, and you can see how the peacock plastic chenille is now starting to flare out. Bring it up right behind the eye, right behind the bead, tie it off, like so. And then just take the whip finisher and finish the fly off right behind the bead, and then apply head cement. So very simple pattern to fish, but it's flashy, it's extremely effective as a leech pattern, and particularly late in the fall period. Cooling down, Dawn. We're past the major insect hatches of the year, so those fish are feeding on as earlier on in the late summer months or summer period.
Oh, now he's back. Look at all this.
My name's
Okay.
Jeff. Not commonly seen free swimming in lakes. They like to hide under logs, rocks, in the vegetation, things like that.
I know. Bug landed right on my head, right in the freaking eyeball, Duke. Oh, we're back at the shelter, and I think now we'll explain what a leech is. What is a leech? No, that sounds stupid. Redundant or what? Okay.
Leeches are members of the phylum Annelida, which are segmented worms, which include earthworms, aquatic earthworms, and leeches.
I just started thinking about something. I had to laugh. Okay, I gotta gather myself. Just the way you're saying that.
Well, leeches are members of the...
Hold on. Just wait a second. I got something funny in the head right now. I gotta get it out. There's something new up at Kalani that when I was filming. I gotta stop. Okay, deep breath. Just wait a minute.
Okay, so I'll pick it up as the leeches are members of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, looking at each other.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Leeches are
I'm ready.
so leeches are members of the phylum Annelida.
I can't do it. I can't look him in the eye right now. Oh man. Can we take an apple break for a minute?
That's a little
Grasshopper?
Aphid or something?
like we're in Australia and it's a Komodo dragon there.
Oh yeah? Cool. Little
Right under your feet.
little lizard?
What the hell?
Whoa! What the hell was that all about? Oh man, oh man.
Oh, that was good.
Who gave us this table anyways? Holy crap.